Hello again. In the previous lecture, what we did is we imported the request library and we made a request to this URL, and we were able to get the content of that web page, which is basically the code, the HTML and JavaScript source code. That's the content we get through a program. That content is shown on the browser as text boxes and titles and text and nice pictures. But the way it looks for computers is like this. Now, so far we haven't done any web scraping yet. All we did is we accessed this web page. So that's not web scraping. Web scraping now is extracting a particular value from that string. That's web scraping. And for web scraping, we need another library, which we are going to install now. But one thing I want to say to you is that this content property of the request object, so that's the request object R, and this is a property of that request object. This content is more generally used when you want to extract files or some PDF or some pictures from a web page. But when we want to extract text or numbers, we want to use r.text. So C now is going to have the same content, but the difference is that this comes as a string. This was a byte type. It's a special type, a special object type in Python. This is a normal string. So we need this r.text. So make sure you update the variable to this value. So C now is a string. And next, let's go ahead and extract that 13 value out of the content of this content. This is how we do it. First of all, we go to the settings and make sure we install. So go to Project, Python Interpreter, click the plus icon and search for selector lib, that one. So make sure you install selector lib. That's the library that is going to do the extraction. Close that window, press cancel or OK here, it doesn't matter. And then from selector lib, import extractor. Extractor is the class that contains the methods that we need to extract that temperature value out of this C variable. And this is how it works. We want to create an extractor object instance out of that object class, and the way to create that is not by instantiating extractor, but by calling the from YAML file method. So that method is the one that instantiates an extractor object instance. That happens sometimes, so you don't always initialize a class using the parentheses in the just after the class name, but a method of that class initializes that class, and this gets as input a path to a file which we need to create. So in the root directory, which is here in my case, right click and go to new file and say temperature or whatever name you like .yaml, the extension. So this is just an empty file, but here now we need to write something, some YAML code, which is very, very simple. Don't worry about that. It works like this. I'll give it a name, or let's say just temp, a colon, press enter. You need some space here. So some indentation, 2 spaces is enough, and then write xpath, a colon again, and some single quotes. Now inside these single quotes, we need to add an xpath, which is like an identifier of this value. So we need to find the xpath of this value. That xpath value identifies this text here. So it locates that text in the source code, because the source code is quite big and each value in this web page has an XPath. So if we figure out what the XPath of this value is, we can write that XPath in here, and we can tell this method the path to that file. So this method can read that XPath and can give us the value of temperature. To find the XPath, you want to right click in here and go to inspect element. And what will happen is that the HTML element that contains this value will be highlighted, as you can see in my browser. So you see 13 degrees Celsius is inside these div tags, but we don't need this element. What we need is we need to right click over the highlighted element and go to copy and go to XPath. Click there, and that should copy the XPath to your clipboard. So you can go here and paste, and that is the XPath of 13 degrees Celsius of the value we need. So now we can provide here the path to our YML file. So temperature.yml, right? And execute. That should have created now an extractor object. As you can see, you can also see here the list of variables and what types you have in those variables. So you see that the extractor here is an extractor object. So you don't have to do this checking for types. You can see them here. That's a nice feature of PyCharm. And finally, let's extract that value, or at least let's try to extract it. Maybe we'll get an error. To do that, to extract the value, you need to refer to the extractor object dot extract, the method of extractor. That method now needs as input the source code of the file, because so far what we did here, we provided the XPath, so the information about the XPath to the extractor, but we haven't told extractor what the source code is that the extractor should search for that XPath. So the extractor needs both the information about the XPath and the information about the source code, so the actual source code to look for that XPath. And we need to give the source code as a string, so either you copy and paste that big string, or you just pass a variable that contains that string, which is a C variable. So a dictionary is the expected output, but none is not what we expected. So what we expected was the value. So this didn't work, and this is okay sometimes with some browsers. So I was using Safari. Now I'm going to try Firefox. So switch to Firefox. And this is a page. Let me load it again to get the latest version. And then right click on the value again. On Firefox, go to Inspect Elements. The HTML element is highlighted. Right click, go to Copy XPath, and then go to the code, to the temperature.yml file. So I'm going to replace that. So the Firefox XPath is different. So let's try again the loss expression, but don't expect to get the answer this time. That's because the extractor that we use here is still the extractor that was created at this point. And at this point we created that extractor with the old XPath, with the one that doesn't work. So Python is still having the old extractor. To fix this, we need to create the extractor again. And make sure to save the file with Ctrl S before we do that. So let's see this time. Extract, and seems to be working. Now of course that doesn't look very nice, but we can fix that. Let's say row result equal to extractor.extract C. So that's the row result, that's a dictionary. Now to get that value, we first need to extract that value out of the dictionary using temp as the key. So that's the value of that key. And then out of that, we could use a replace method. Since now this is a string, we can apply the replace method to that string. And we want to replace that part. We don't need that. So copy it, paste it in here inside the quotes, and then the second argument will be an empty string. So that part of the string will be replaced with this string, which is empty, and that means we get only 13. So the end result would be that converted into a float. The result now is a number. So that's the temperature we got. And this is the entire code you can see in here. That's how to scrape a temperature value out of this web page. Now I hope this will help you to create a temperature class and be able to initialize the temperature class using any country and any city as input values. So basically your temperature class should work like this. Let's say the user will initialize it like that, giving a city, let's say Rome, and country Italy, for example. And then when they do temperature.get, they get that 13 value, that's float, as output. So that's my idea at least, but you can have another implementation if you like. Again, this is how you do it, how you do the scraping part. So thanks for following, I'll talk to you later.